All right. Well, welcome to yet another wonderful session by our wonderful associate, Claudia. We've already seen two, and we can't get enough. So that's why she is doing one more. And for those who have not yet been introduced to Claudia, she is Italian and she is a translator. She lives in Sicily. And most important, well, she's done a lot of other things, including lots of travel. And one important thing about her that relates to her session today is that a few years ago, she stumbled upon mindfulness. And she was so passionate about it that she took serious training with John Kabat-Zinn, who is one of the biggest authorities on that subject at MIT in Massachusetts. And she has been giving mindfulness lessons ever since. And today you will be the beneficiary of her practice, her expertise. And with that, I invite you and everybody who is listening to the recording to buckle up and be ready for Claudia. Claudia, over to you.
Yes, thank you very much, Anita, and thank you everybody for being so resistant, resilient, and willing to take yet another session. I've also been here all day today as the host of today, but it's been such a privilege, and it's been really wonderful to see how all the sessions are somehow related and are enriching each other. So including mine today just before me we had Laura talking about her difficult period through illness. So now I'm going to talk about self-care, and I think I had the best introduction ever. We also had Pamela Alexander, who had the same training, basically mindfulness as me. So she's already talked extensively about what we mean by mindfulness, what is the difference between reacting and responding, and that possibility of maybe creating a different way of dealing with ourselves. What I would like to do tonight is to focus on a specific attitude that belongs to mindfulness, and that is also the part of mindfulness that is the closest I find to self-worth. So this is what has brought me here, probably what has attracted my attention when I first got in touch with John to start all of this safari adventure. So I will start with a picture, and I also invite you to, since this time we have a bit more time, I would still like to do a short practice, because mainly mindfulness and self-worth, we want to be practical. But I will give you a short introduction of what I mean by self-care, self-compassion, self-forgiveness, self-acceptance, and self-worth. And I would like you to write in the chat or even raise your hands and intervene. I would like this to be as interactive as possible this time. So I will start with a picture that one of my best friends here has drawn for me. And I would like to know what this feels like for you. I'm sure you're familiar with a version that is maybe less nicer than this, that you used to see a lot at those times when we flew all over the world. But what's the immediate reaction to somebody who tells you, especially if you are parents, if you are caregivers? So if you have vulnerable people around you who are dependent on you, if you're told take care of yourself first, then looking at this picture, it might feel a bit strange, a bit shocking, maybe for parents to think, oh my God, why would I ever take care of myself first? That's not possible. I'm trying to read the chat. Let's move this on the side. Yes, exactly. So I okay, I'm reading the chat here. It is right. It's what I like about your comments is that you get the point. We know it's right, because otherwise, I mean, we're not stupid. Like, why would we find this kind of message on flights, on planes? And yet we cannot but feel a bit like emotionally shocked by this kind of message. Exactly. So the difference between the logic, so the intellectual, yes, of course, it makes sense, and the feeling. And this is so much at the core of everything we've been talking about, at least for me. And it's something that also Dr. Pennington said the other night, right? About a lot of therapy, for example, has this kind of intellectual approach where you get to understand, yeah, why you are behaving this way, and why, yeah, maybe your parents, your education, and what you should be like, and it would make more sense. But then to feel it really, that's a totally different story. And that's where, for me, my encounter with mindfulness first, especially the self-compassion part, and then self-worth, really made the difference, because that was my chance to go from understanding intellectually that yes, it makes sense to take care of me before I can do anything for other people, and actually feeling the effect of this, and all of a sudden embracing this paradox and understanding that that's the only way, actually the way in, before we can go out. So I would move on to a definition that I found of compassion that I really like. Let me minimize my camera. And this I found in an app, Petit Bamboo, a meditation app that I really recommend, that I've been translating into Italian, so the Italian version. And I found this recently: compassion is love applied to suffering. So very simple, very true. So the idea is to bring support, right? And so self-compassion would be to bring support to ourselves, clearly. The problem here is that how do we do that? And how can we go from understanding that makes sense to actually feeling it? So I would like to take you on a very short journey through the idea of self-compassion as it's been presented in different contexts. It's been mentioned today, actually, I think, the so-called Buddhist psychology or spiritual area. So they've been talking for a long time about self-compassion, compassion and self-compassion. Actually, today I even found out that there is a thing called compassionomics. There is a book called The Revolutionary Scientific Evidence That Caring Makes a Difference. So compassion has become kind of a phenomenon that is being studied and makes sense even from a social marketing point of view, as Sarah Kirk would say. That was a very interesting input from the education panel. But so from the spiritual point of view, these three names that you find here are just three out of many. They're Westerners that in the 70s went to Asia and met the Dalai Lama, and then brought back Buddhism and meditation to the West, mainly to North America. And there's one specific event that I would like to share with you, and they talk about all the time. And it's the fact that once they met the Dalai Lama, they asked him at some point how they could deal with these people in the West, their practitioners, when they felt self-hatred. And this was a huge translation issue. And I'm sorry, but here the linguist in me comes out. It's so fascinating to me. So apparently in the Dalai Lama's language, this doesn't exist. Self-hatred doesn't exist. The translator didn't know how to translate this. And when he paraphrased it, the Dalai Lama was so shocked that this was an issue. Like, why would people hate themselves? That doesn't make any sense. And, you know, it's probably the story of Eskimos having so many names for the snow. Like, normally, if you know a phenomenon well, you have many words to describe it, and the opposite is also true. So it's interesting that although we are in the West, we think we're more, I don't know, careful about our self or wellness or whatever. Actually, we're a more individualistic society, and so we also suffer more from self-hatred. In the same way, I would like also to say that in Italian, we don't have a word for self-worth, which is also probably very telling. And every time I have to translate that, I don't know, I'm dreaming of the day I'm going to translate John's book into Italian. We'll have to talk about that because I don't know exactly how we could translate that. So that is a first kind of point of view, a first perspective that is very valuable. Then there's this other very interesting branch, which is mindfulness, since the end of the 70s with John Kabat-Zinn and the mindfulness-based stress reduction protocol, which is the one that I've been trained in. It's this protocol that has been studied, and actually started from that, neuroscience has started to really study the effects of mindfulness, and including several approaches such as self-compassion on our minds, on how we can train our minds and our reactions to be different, to be more responsive. And here again, I've given you a few names. Some of the most famous people that have been studying, especially self-compassion, are Kristin Neff, Christopher Germer, and Paul Gilbert. And actually, as recently as last week, there was a beautiful summit that they organized called Compassion in Therapy, where they're really understanding the importance of compassion, both for therapists towards their patients and for patients towards themselves. So it's quite a revolutionary approach even for therapy, because they are really moving towards feeling more than just, okay, I'm going to fix you. It's not really about fixing. And then John came along, and and we have another addition, which is, okay, but I deserve this. And this is not easy, because again, we understand compassion for ourselves is good, but it's not to be taken for granted that we deserve it. And all of a sudden now, thanks to self-worth, we know that it's something innate. We don't have to develop self-compassion. We don't have to develop self-worth. It's there. We just have to revive it. We have to, as Buddhist saying says, we're already perfect, but we can always improve. We're already okay, which doesn't mean that we cannot work on ourselves, but we are okay already. And before moving to well, first of all, I don't know if there's any reactions, any comments, or wait. Yeah, well, it's revolutionary, Monica. I'm reading now. It's not revolutionary. I think you're talking about therapy. Basic approach, but apparently in therapy, very often there is this need to intervene and take you a longer road, that there's kind of an agenda, whereas in this case it's more about the expression of what's already there. And it's something that is complementing very well the therapies that are normally used. Heartfelt sense, yes. I'd like to show you an example of one of these applications of self-compassion to therapy. And to me, it's kind of interesting and funny, because it's a trick they play for when people don't really feel they deserve self-compassion. So it's the point that John has pointed out. So what if you don't feel your worth of compassion? And they're using virtual reality. It's interesting. It's very interesting. And this opens a number of possibilities for the future. It's a short video that I would like to watch with you and also comment with you, because there are a couple of things that I don't completely, that are kind of, let's see if you pick them. But still, I mean, it's interesting that with neuroscience, we can use all of this technology to intervene in the way we see things. In this case, well, it's going to be explained, but basically with virtual reality, people are taking two different roles and talking to themselves, or talking to children rather, that can be themselves. But in general, when we talk to children, we tend to be more supportive, more loving, and then seeing themselves in the other role and the effect that this can have.
It's not nice when things happen to us that we don't like. It's really upset you, hasn't it?
Learning to overcome feelings of inadequacy isn't easy, but a team of psychologists are helping those with esteem issues by teaching them self-compassion, using avatars in an immersive 3D virtual reality.
What might they say to you now that would make you feel a bit better?
The researchers have developed a unique self-to-self scenario in which participants are asked to express compassion towards a distressed virtual child while wearing a virtual adult bodysuit. The roles are then reversed, with participants transferred into the body of the virtual child. From this perspective, they see their original virtual adult body deliver their own compassionate words back to them.
It's really helpful to think of someone who loves you and is kind to you, or someone special to you.
Dr. Caroline Falconer, postdoctoral research associate at University College London, said participants reported immediate benefits.
Afterwards, participants are a lot more self-compassionate and they're a lot less self-critical. Okay, so this is from a one-off session. We're now looking at the longevity of these effects in the ongoing work that we're doing here at UCL. But also participants are reporting feeling safer, more content and more relaxed after the virtual reality session as well.
She says the virtual reality scenario offers an ideal platform to tackle many mental health issues.
What the virtual reality does is it provides us a platform to tackle various mental health problems. Okay, so one, for example, would be to deal with various aspects of the self. So you could personify in an avatar an aspect of yourself, your subordinate self, you know, the self that goes out on a Friday night that you don't like, and or you know, your submissive self, or you know, your shy self, etc.
The teams from UCL and the universities of Barcelona and Derby are setting up an in-depth clinical study of their methods. And with the technology becoming ever more portable and cheaper, they say virtual reality therapy could offer a more accessible means of treating mental illness.
Okay, do you have any reaction to this?
Yes.
Please, John.
Quite a lot.
We have.
I mean, I'm so reminded of Guy McPherson's session yesterday, because what virtual reality can do, and could do really well, I guess, is lift the techniquey stuff and translate that into avatars, etc. But my God, what about the compassion? What about the connection? You know, what about the heart connection that Monica talks about? You know, again, I see potential from a technique level, but I see ever increasing solipsism from an existential level if we actually end up having robots give us our therapy.
We have in the chat here, let's see, we have
Monica.
Yeah,
says, I can. Very active in the chat, so now we want to hear your voice.
Yes. Thank you for this. It's wow. It's I never heard about it, and I have a mixture of feelings. Both how we can be creative to find actual IT tools. And the other hand, where is humanity? Where is the really warm connection? Because of I really, really feel it, and it's not belief. I have it in all my personality that we can create the deep connection only with other human, not with avatar. And yes, I can imagine it could be helpful when I'm really ashamed to when I and I'm definitely not secure to tell somebody something, and it brings me back in very safe level without any judgment. It could be nice, and on the other hand, we can experience it in maybe role plays, or really staying in a really human to human, head and heart connection. So this is really mixture of all of this. But thank you.
Yeah.
So you get the impression you're a guinea pig. They're guinea pigs. And then Faye said, but it's playing the test subject's own words back to them. It's that effect that is interesting, she thinks. And I think it lacks the human connection. Yeah, this is how our student teachers are practicing being teachers. It's not effective in the long run. Potentially good for raising awareness, yes. I would love to hear myself talking for me in a compassionate way, maybe because I'm an only child, self-centered. Yeah. And
I love it because there's so many mixed feelings here. I mean, there is one side that is useful because yes, we're talking to ourselves. So it's actually, in the end, it's a trick to overcome that feeling that we're not worthy being talked like that. And so we need somebody else, which is still us. But the technique makes it a bit arid, probably, and not human enough.
But I can imagine also people who feel isolated and maybe don't have any friends that they can just hug, and especially in these days, that it's a good warm-up kind of thing, to give them that inner feeling that they are worthy, that they can love themselves, and that could enable them to overcome the barriers to meeting other people, going out there.
I'd like to just second that, actually. A very interesting perspective, Anita. It might make personal development accessible to people who don't find it accessible at the moment. And I think if that's possible, we should certainly welcome it.
I don't know if you noticed that they talked about self-esteem. So
I noticed.
More detailed, of course. And one more thing, they talked something that struck me as a bit, kind of stigmatizing of like mental illness. Like they talked twice about mental illness and mental disease or something like that. But I believe that we all need to talk to ourselves that way. I mean, it's part of why we're here now talking about self-worth. So we all deal with this inner critic, we all deal with judgments and voices, and it's not about feeling that is something wrong or abnormal. Actually, I mean, I would go more towards like normalizing this, and except for, of course, extreme situations, I think it's something that would be beneficial for all of us to talk to ourselves this way. And this is how we are encouraging everybody to do, even with self-worth, right? So there is in the playlist that maybe Anita can share again from that link that I gave you before, Anita. I don't know if you have it handy. I've created a small playlist of videos that I've used in this during these 3 sessions, including this one. And there's one more that I find really interesting that talks about these inner voices. And there are two. There's a TED talk by Eleanor Longden, who was diagnosed with schizophrenia at college because she had all these two inner voices. And actually she became a psychiatrist, and now she has created this international association of inner voice friends or something. And then there's another short animation video made by the King's College in London that is called Compassion for Voices. So the same self-compassionate approach is offered to our inner voices. So it's always the attitude that makes a huge difference. And it's not really something so unusual or so to be treated as, illness. At least that's my opinion. Anyway, it was really interesting, but now we're here to practice, and my practice is, on the contrary, since we know that we are worthy of giving ourselves self-compassion, to use a self-compassion practice that has been designed by Christine Neff based on her model that structures self-compassion around three main areas, but enriched with the self-worth approach, so that we don't need any virtual reality and we can just practice and talk to ourselves in this way without any robots involved. So I invite you for a short practice. Anything anybody would like to say? More comments? I don't know if I've missed anything. Amy, the kids would think it is cool to try. Okay, yeah, it could be a good approach for younger generations, I guess, this for sure. Okay, so, okay, we can do a short practice. We'll have some more time to share afterwards. Again, no need to connect to any strange technology. And quite the opposite. I would like you to just really relax. Like, you don't even have to be, kind of straight back, blah, blah, blah. Just take whatever position feels the most comfortable for you right now. Comfortable from a physical, but also from an emotional point of view. In the idea really of having this attitude of self-care. So the practice is a practice of befriending, of offering this gift, like these flowers, like the nice illustration from the Self-Worth Safari book shows, to being a loyal friend to ourselves and to support us with whatever words and whatever gestures we feel are needed right now. So let's just relax into whatever posture and closing our eyes, going inside as usual to see what's true for us right now. First connecting with our body, our breathing. And then bring into mind something that is slightly stressful right now. It doesn't need to be anything major. Stress is really something very relative. Stress is defined in mindfulness as a transaction that is perceived as exacting, taxing on our resources. So it means simply that we feel like we don't have enough resources to cope with whatever situation. And sometimes the situation is very small. It can be, especially during this period, it takes very little to make us feel stressed, depleted, anxious. So maybe it's just feeling a bit overwhelmed, a bit tired, or worried about a specific situation, a relation maybe. So connecting really with what's going on. What's this situation like? Bringing it to life. So what happened or what might happen if it's a worry? Who said what if it is about a relation? And as we know by now, feeling where that is to be found in our bodies and breathing into that area to soothe it, to support it. Making space, unrolling the red carpet for whatever is here because it's here. And this is the first pillar. Something is here. Actually, suffering, some form of suffering is here. So the first pillar is to be aware. Aware to the fact that suffering is present. Also aware maybe of the fact that we don't want it to be here, aware of our aversion, of our judgments. And finding the way to speak to ourselves that is the most suitable right now. How can we express this acknowledgement that suffering is here? We can maybe simply say, this is a moment of suffering or of sadness, of frustration, or this is really hard. Or I'm really struggling. Or even just ouch, which in Italian would be ai, or whatever in your language. And then after having made space and having acknowledged the presence of something unpleasant, connecting to the fact that this feeling is not something abnormal, it's something human. So reminding of common humanity, of the fact that we're not alone. Each of us feels suffering in a different way, to a different extent, but we all feel suffering, that is for sure. So we don't need to feel separated, to feel isolated, to feel lonely, which is very often one of the major causes of increased suffering. We can feel connected to other people who probably right now feel exactly this way for multiple number of reasons. So we can tell ourselves that many people go through a similar situation. Many people feel a similar suffering. And even physically, we can feel that as we breathe in, other people in the world are probably breathing in with the same unpleasant, painful feeling that we are experiencing now. And this is exactly why, in the third step of our practice, we now want to support ourselves. We know that we deserve it. We know that we should take care of ourselves first. So, as if we were talking to a child, to a friend, without needing any virtual reality, really. What are the words that we need to be told right now? Very often, people around us don't get us. Maybe they are good willing, but they say the wrong thing. We can tell ourselves exactly the words that we need. Maybe one of our self-worth mantras. I'm here for you. Or it's going to be okay. I care about you. We can even call ourselves by our own name, like Claudia, I've got your back. Finding our way of comforting us, of wishing ourselves to be free from this suffering. And as part of this, a very, very important part of this is self-acceptance and self-forgiveness for our not being perfect, and being able to say these words even if we make mistakes, even if we're not perfect. We're still deserving of these words. And I invite you to keep your eyes closed for a couple of minutes more. I would like to read a poem. You know by now that I love poems, and I find them more meaningful than many other words. This is quite a long one, but a very beautiful one that I would like to share with you. And it's about self-forgiveness. Phase 1 by Dilruba Ahmed. For leaving the fridge open last night, I forgive you. For conjuring white curtains instead of living your life. For the seedlings that wilt now in tiny pots, I forgive you. For saying no first, but yes as an afterthought. I forgive you for hideous visions after childbirth, brought on by loss of sleep. And when the baby woke repeatedly, for your silent rebuke in the dark, what's your beef? I forgive your letting vines overtake the garden, for fearing your own propensity to love, for losing again your bag en route from San Francisco, for the equally heedless drive back on the caffeine-fueled return. I forgive you for leaving windows open in rain and soaking library books again, for putting forth only revisions of yourself with punctuation worked over, instead of the disordered truth, I forgive you. For singing mostly when the shower drowns your voice. For so admiring the drummer, you failed to hear the drum. I forgive you. For feeling awkward and nervous without reason. For bearing Keats's empty vessel with such calm, you worried you had perhaps no moral center at all. For treating your mother with contempt when she deserved compassion, I forgive you. I forgive you. I forgive you. For growing a capacity for love that is great, but matched only perhaps by your loneliness. For being unable to forgive yourself first, so you could then forgive others and at last find a way to become the love that you want in this world. For being unable to forgive yourself first, so you could then forgive others and at last find a way to become the love that you want in this world. And then I invite you to slowly reconnect to the outside with the wish of forgiving ourselves first, putting on our mask first, as a gift to ourselves and to everybody else around us. And Bess, yes, the poem is even here in the PowerPoint, so you'll find it in the PDF. Phase 1, Dilrub Ahmed. We may have a couple of minutes if anybody would like to share the poem. I agree. I listened to it the first time in the car. There's podcasts on poems by an Irish guy, actually. And I was so moved, I almost had to stop the car on my way to work. How effective was this self-talk without virtual reality?
I prefer your reality, Claudia.
It's your reality, but yeah.
What I always appreciate the way that you unroll the red carpet is that it's everything is allowed in. It's a very generous approach that allows everything in without judging it. And it comes across in that poem just as it comes across in all of your approach. And it really, for me, personifies self-work in action, the ability to deal with stuff as it is without having to sift it through judgmental lenses first.
And Daga said, could you please share the name of the podcast?
Yes, it's by On Being. On Being, do you know On Being? It's an organization that does a lot of it's like Buddhist orientation, and they have a poetry podcast. So I'm sure if you look for On Being and then poems, you'll find it. And this guy has a name that I could never pronounce. So John Father, or I don't know, but he reads wonderfully, and just a short, like 15-minute with some commentary, really beautiful. You're welcome, Doug.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I guess we need to move soon because I need to open Anita's room soon.
I'm going to stop sharing the video, and then I will quickly